Okay, this is the third demo in our introduction to Illustrator. And we had just drawn a half a robot using the pin tool. What's nice about the pin tool is it gives us, there we go, it gives us perfect control of straights and curves. And I did mine in two portions here. And we decided to just do half the robot because now we're going to make it symmetrical. But something I'm noticing, and you can use the same shortcuts for navigation as you do in Photoshop, so Command plus to zoom in, hold down spacebar and drag to move across. I'm noticing that for it to be symmetrical and not have a dent in the top, I need to move this anchor up to where this line is horizontal. So I'm going to use the small selection tool, and basically no matter what tool you're on, whether it's the pen tool or the pencil tool, which are kind of my go-to favorites, or even the brush tool, which we'll get to, if you hold down Command, it will turn it to the small selection tool. So we're using the pen tool, but I'm going to hold down Command, so it's the white arrow, the small selection tool. I'm going to click just on that anchor, and I'm going to move it up until it shows that it's horizontal. Oops. All right. See, so that's at the horizontal point there. See that straight line? Okay. Now, how do I take this design and flip it? Well, so far, we've used all one layer. But now I'm going to take that layer and just select everything in it. You can do that by clicking on the little circle selector next to the layer, or by using the large selection tool and just drawing a box around everything. It's all selected. Now I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, or you can do Command C, very helpful. But now, instead of pasting it into this layer, I'm going to lock this layer so that I can't accidentally do anything. You'll see the kind of no sign next to my pencil there. Won't let me add to it. And I'm going to create a new layer, just like you do in Photoshop. And then from there, I'm going to say Edit, Paste in Place. And then right on top, this time shown with red, I have a new layer of all the same identical paths. Okay. Now I'm going to take that layer and I'm going to transform it. And I'm going to use the large selection tool. And I'm going to right click on it, say Transform. And this looks very different than the transform tools in Photoshop that we're used to. There's no warp or skew. Instead, there are these different terms: move, rotate, reflect, scale, shear. And the one we're going to do here is reflect. Okay? And we're going to actually reflect it vertical, as though there's a mirror standing vertical to it, reflecting it. Though I think they really could have used either one. And at a 90-degree angle. So make sure vertical is checked. If it was horizontal, then I would have a mirror image directly underneath it. So I'm going to say vertical at 90, say OK, and then it flips it. Now I'm going to use that large selection tool. I'm still on it. And I'm just going to use my arrows on the keyboard and move it into place. Why the arrows on the keyboard? Well, that makes sure it doesn't shift up or down at all. You can also drag it just like you did with your shape tools. And hold down Shift, and that will keep it from moving up and down as well. Right. Okay, now I want to have that one line where both of those layers are overlapping. And you see I have a nice clean curve over the top because I moved that anchor point up to where it was horizontal. Okay, now the problem is one layer is one half, the other layer in one unique path, and this other layer is another unique path. And so there's no way for me to get rid of that line down the middle as long as they're unique paths. So I need to blend them together, merge them all into one vector path. And the way you do that, I've unlocked layer 1, is we use a tool called the Pathfinder tool, which is also very handy. And Pathfinder, I like to keep it in my toolbar here. It's all about how you can overlay layers, merge them together, or have them exclude each other. But first I have to select all the layers. So I have both layers unlocked. I'm going to use the large selection tool and draw through everything. And then I'm going to say Pathfinder Unite. Ooh, so dramatic. And now the vectors have come together, and because they overlapped on that line, it was redundant. It gets rid of that. It's one clean vector shape now. Isn't that a beautiful thing? We can all get together, people. People divide, Illustrator unites. All right, now I like my robot shape, but he's looking really thin. We played last time with different stroke sizes. You know, different widths, different types of strokes. Or even some of these more interesting strokes. I love their sketchy one, which is pretty new. But that doesn't really give me the symmetry I want, right? So I'm just going to keep it nice and uniform on the basic line. But maybe make it just a little bit thicker, maybe 4 points. Okay, so now, maybe I don't want to stroke at all. Maybe I just want to fill it in as a black silhouette. That might be a good place to start, or maybe a different color. But if I just swap these two, that will give me no stroke and all fill. But of course, first I have to select it. All right, so now I've got my black silhouette of my robot. But now I want this to be a logo. So I have this nice symmetrical logo. It's very clean. It's very, has a lot of cool dynamic shapes. But I want something in here. And I don't want it to be just a cutout on top. You know, something that's layered on top that always has to be white. I want it to show the background. So how do I cut out of this vector? Well, let's make a new layer. And I'm going to make this an iRobot logo for Isaac Asimov's book. Okay? So I'm going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to lock these two layers, even though there's nothing on that bottom layer anymore. And I'm going to use the text tool. And the text tool is fantastic in Illustrator. We'll be using it a lot later. And I'm going to draw a big box. Kind of fills up the middle here. And now I'm going to choose a font and choose a point size. And this is going to be pretty large. So let me try like 200, just so I can see it clearly. I'm going to choose a color, and I want to fill color. I'm going to use white. And then I'm going to just write my letter. So I want an I. I don't want just any I, though. I want it bold. Okay? And now I want to make it even bigger. So how about 400? Will that fit in my box? Not quite, so I have to make it smaller. You see that little minus there? That means it's outside of the range of that text box. Let's try 350. Yes, there we go. Now notice it's left justified. I can also center it in my box. Maybe that looks good. And then because it's on its own vector path, I can kind of nudge it over, get it perfectly centered. So maybe I like this. But what if, oh, I love that circle, that's perfect, but I want this to be down a little bit and I want it to be squatter. So even though I use the font to get that shape, I can right click it once I have the text tool. I can edit it, of course, this way. I can, while it's still text, I can distort it and stretch it out. I can do various things to it, but it's always going to keep the integrity as long as it's text. So what I'm going to do now is right-click on it and say Create Outlines. And that makes it no longer a text font that's linked to a certain shape. It just makes it a vector. So in this case, 2 different paths. Then I can use the small selection tool, select this path, and change it. So maybe I want the eye to be a different shape and to be a little bit lower down. Then maybe I want this to be a little bit bigger. And now it will all distort with me. And as individual paths, I can keep on tinkering with it. Oops. As long as I click just on the anchor points. Now, fooling around and doodling in Illustrator is fine, but you'll see that you just have so many options, it becomes overwhelming until you have a vision, a sketch you can use. So that's why when we start this next project, we're going to start it with a sketch for our logo designs. Now here's the final step. So the problem is these are white. So if I move everything, let's unlock this so I can move everything. If I select everything and take it off the artboard, which is often helpful to see how the logo would work on a dark background, you'll see that it's white there. And I don't want it to be white there. I want it to show the background. So how do I cut those shapes out of the larger robot? And that's what I'll show you next. Well, we're going to use the Pathfinder for that. To make it read like an eye, I think I'm going to straighten those out. And this is why people like Illustrator, because you can really just get everything exact. All of those are different anchor points you can use for the different curves. You can just really modify everything. Okay, so now let's take the whole thing, put it back. Well, actually, no, I'll just leave it here so you can see. Okay, now I'm going to use the Pathfinder. I'm going to select everything. No layers are locked. I go to the Pathfinder tool, and this time, instead of uniting, I'm going to exclude. And it's going to exclude overlapping shape areas. Boom. Okay? It cuts it all out. It changed its color just because the white was the shape it was getting rid of, so it switched the white to here. But that's easy to fix, right? I simply change the fill color to whatever I want. To black, to pink. I think a pink eye robot's kind of cool. To gray. I'm a big fan of gray. Right now, let's put it back on the design board, see how it looks. Maybe we want to put a stroke around it, select the whole thing. Move it back to our artboard, which remember doesn't matter at all except that it's showing us how it would print on a letter-sized piece of paper. But because it's a vector, we could print this at perfect resolution at any size. Okay, so I've got my eye robot. Now maybe I want to give it just a nice kind of fill, a gradation detail. So I'm just going to select the body here. And I'm going to, I have the large selection tool. If I just want to select just the top half and not the legs, I could use the small selection tool and do this. And then exclude. Oops. Remember, Command-Z works infinitely backwards. I always get it confused with Photoshop. So the more you do Command-Z, the more you go backwards. So we're going to select it all. And now I'm going to fill it with a gradation. But what if I want the gray to be underneath? So in my layers, and I do this a lot, I'm going to make a new copy. So I'm going to say Command-C. I'm going to make a new layer, lock the layer underneath, and then paste in place on top. So now it has a blue outline. And now with this, I'm going to fill it with not a solid, but with a gradient. And I'm going to play with that gradient. And I don't want it to just be white and black. I actually want it to be, let's see. Ooh, you know what? I think I'll do this. Okay. So this gives me just kind of fading oranges. I can replace these colors with anything. But I'm going to change the angle of it from 0 degrees to 90 degrees, so it kind of goes top to bottom. And maybe I want negative 90 degrees. There we go. And now I'm going to change these colors just by clicking on them and changing the color here. And I'm going to have this be kind of cooler colors.